Welcome everybody to episode 17 of the You Can't Comp This NBA Trading Card Podcast. My name is Russell Gibson. I will be your exclusive host tonight. Adam Amy is our other co-host and he has a well-deserved night off for the long weekend. So it'll just be me by myself, and we've got a lot to talk about this week. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into Tyrese Maxey. We're going to give an update about what Fanatics has been getting up to. I'd like to talk about Donruss and the Net Marvels press proof situation, LeBron James, Greg Popovich, Luka Doncic, and lastly, we're going to do a Zion Watch update. So thank you so much for listening, and let's get on with the show. So Tyrese Maxey is the first thing I want to talk about tonight. I think he has definitely been in the forefront of my mind the last week because of the situation that he's in. So there's three really important things that you need to understand when you consider Tyrese Maxey and his trading card value at the moment. I think the first thing is that the college he went to was Kentucky. So we've talked about this before. People that go to Kentucky, they go to this absolutely loaded team. They go to a program that is absolutely NBA ready for prospects. They just go into an NBA environment there, and it's literally like an NBA cooking school. So they go there, they get raised, they get taught by Calipari, and then they go to the NBA basically. So they, in terms of products being drafted into the NBA, Kentucky is easily leading that race over the last 10 years. And the downside of that, though, is that their program is so stacked. They're getting all these prospects into there and they really don't get a chance to reach their absolute potential. So someone like Tyrese Maxey, who essentially was an afterthought in his draft class, really could have gone to a different school and, been drafted, significantly higher. But he did get drafted in the first round and he did go to Philadelphia. So I think, the relevant context here is that Philadelphia PYTs have been really cheap, and also the focus has been on other players. So Maxey has really slid under the radar, and I think the reason why he's now into people's focus at the moment is because there's definitely an expectation that Philadelphia is going to make a deep playoff run this year. So acquisition of James Harden and essentially the removal of Ben Simmons has put Philadelphia into a very strong position in a extremely competitive but also very wide open Eastern Conference. So at the end of the day, I really think Brooklyn has the firepower to win the whole thing. But I would also say too that Philadelphia has the strength, it has the size, and it really has the roster balance to make a very deep run. So I think Tyrese Maxey is important at the moment in terms of, the trading card landscape because he's still at a relatively cheap place. You can pick up somebody that is a very good young prospect with the opportunity for him to be, getting very long and deep playoff exposure, and I think that's really going to help his value over the next few months. If you've already got Tyrese Maxey on hand and you got Philadelphia in a random break and you're not really that stuck to the hip with Maxey, you don't really care about his cards, I think now is a really good time to think about flipping them because you're definitely going to be seeing a bit of a peak in terms of his value. In terms of when is he going to hit his ceiling, look, obviously that's very hit and miss. You might see a little bit more of a rise, but at the same time too, if you sell at the moment, I don't think that's a terrible idea. So just looking at his silver prices, he's up 64% over the last 3 months. And the last month or so though, he's been very consistent. Apart from a couple of sales that sort of peaked at a stage, I think at the moment, if you're buying them for around $50 US, you're getting a very good deal. If you're going above 60 or 70, even up to 80, because that's where they've been selling, I would be very judicious at buying in that point with the idea to flip it on. I think you'll have a lot of trouble if you're buying it at 80 USD to flip. But yeah, again, around that sort of $50 mark is a really good purchase. If you're buying it for PC, to spend as much as you need to, because I think at this stage he's only going to go up. One really interesting thing actually that I found was his Prism Draft Picks card. So actually that's been sitting around for a silver. It's been floating around the $1 mark for months and months and months. It's only one sale, but it's actually jumped up to $9. So If you know me and you know how much I love Prism draft picks, I'm absolutely rapt to see this. So if you can get $10 for a silver Maxey, again, that's just sitting in a box of yours, and you flip that into something that you really enjoy, that is an absolute home run, and I will definitely be doing that. The final thing I just want to really touch on here too is as to why Maxey is a really good buy at the moment is because I think the acquisition of James Harden really does put pressure onto Maxey's A, touches, and B, minutes, but that is not what's played out at all. So James Harden has been in Philadelphia now for 6 games on the court, and the last 5 games for Tyrese Maxey, his minutes read like this: 29, 36, 35, 38, and 36. His points per game in that span has been very much, at the same time as up and down, it's also been consistent. So 25 points and 33 points. And then his last 3 games have been a little bit lower, so 17, 17, and 4 points. But keeping in mind, that was a game against Brooklyn that, even though the final score was closer than what it says, if you actually watch that game, that was an absolute blowout, and Brooklyn just laid the smackdown. So I would put that single game as sort of a small sample size. And I think if you're looking at in terms of, how Doc is going to be planning his rotations and how he's going to be building the team, their schemes and their structures, I think you should look at that sort of overall 6-game sample size and be, very positively, reassured in that space there. So I think that's it for Tyrese Maxey. Let's move on to Fanatics. Fanatics have been moving and shaking, and I don't think that is an understatement to say that. And recently they did a pretty big announcement. They went on to Sports Cards Nonsense. So if you'd like to hear the announcement for yourself, which if you do not subscribe to Sports Cards Nonsense, but you somehow subscribe to our podcast, I cannot tell you enough that you need to subscribe to these guys. These guys are the king of trading card podcasts in terms of entertainment and also information and getting scoops. So they got a massive scoop. They had Josh Luber come onto the podcast and talk about the Gary V project. So they have launched their own platform called zerocool.com. Go and check that out. It's a really interesting trading card website. They are explaining all sorts of different concepts about how they want to interact with people moving into the future. And they've done an exclusive deal with Gary V. And what they did was they made 1,000 boxes of essentially Gary V cards. Gary V has been making NFTs for sale, and now he's rolled that into actual trading cards. I personally think this is more of a marketing exercise and something that, and I'm saying this in the kindest way possible, something they can make money on. I think Gary V is very important to the trading card community, and essentially he's a massive influencer in this space. So I think getting a deal with Gary V is very important for Fanatics. Kudos, and establishing down future deals and products available for people. So I think in that space, that's why it's important. Looking at this product and looking at the graphics and the detail that's been applied to these cards, I think it's absolute dog, and I wouldn't buy this, for a second. But obviously, I'm not in this space at all, so it's a little bit hard for me to sort of, make a real-time and also informed, comment about this. So if I'm offending anybody with my opinion about this, please tell me about it. Why? Please contact me on our Twitter at youcantcompthis. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram, youcantcompthis. And I'd love to hear, why I'm wrong about this, because to me, when I look at this product, I don't see why they sold this for $2,150 a box. I just really don't. So please, tell me why, because I'd love to hear why. I think that the Zero Cool platform is really important, though, is the other part of what they're releasing, because what they're trying to do here is release products that are in the entertainment space, in the celebrity space, and also the politics space. So that's where they want to get into. They want to control NBA, MLB, NFL, and also to add that to the celebrity space. So Fanatics has been saying the last few months is they want to grow the hobby. And I suppose I was a little bit skeptical of how they would do that, and also to how they would do it organically and I suppose naturally without, overproducing product and just making it watered down, basically terrible coffee. And I think this is one of their strategies that they're trying to do. So they'll get people into different types of trading cards. So celebrities, politicians, people like Gary Vee that will then tread in, see what's going on, and then come in to NBA, MLB, NFL. I think that's a really good organic way to bring people in. So, kudos to them on that. I think that's really cool. The other thing that definitely is worth mentioning here is about the Dutch auction. So none of these boxes was sold for a set price. It was all sold by Dutch auction, and it's not the traditional Dutch auction the way that Panini does it. It's a completely different system. I'm not going to go in and break this down now because I won't be able to do it justice, but it's spoken about on the Cardboard Nonsense podcast. And also too, if you want to find out more information about it, they've actually got videos on their website, which is, linked to YouTube. So just, spend 5 minutes listening to that because they explain it really, really well. In terms of providing a fair system for people and a way that, the company can still make a profit, this does seem to me like a genuine win-win, and, good for them for trying to do something like this. Alrighty, the next thing I wanted to talk about too was Donruss's release. I've had a bit more of an opportunity to get my hands onto it now. I've busted a box that was very enjoyable. My thoughts walking away from this product is that I'd actually forgotten how base heavy the product was. And sort of in a way, it's actually got more base cards than hoops, which is, for me, again, I'd completely forgotten that. So if you do enjoy building up base sets, if you do enjoy collecting cards, that aren't particularly valuable, but you just enjoy looking at the artwork and you enjoy reading the statistics on the back, absolutely this product is for you. The price hasn't spiked perhaps in the way that I was expecting it to. I was really expecting it to come out on release day and then, trend upwards. It hasn't trended upwards. Actually, it's been very static. I probably think it'll drop down in the next 3 or 4 weeks though. If it does drop down $50 to $100, I actually think it's a really good buy because the chase card in that is the next day autos, and they really do have fantastic long-term value in terms of, chasing them and of course, flipping the boxes when they're still sealed. One really interesting footnote, and I do need to give credit here. So this is to Oyvind Holland. He spoke to me about this. He basically said all of the Donruss Net Marvels have been marked as press proof. When I looked at the cards a little bit closer after opening the box, that is correct, Oyvind. All of them have been marked as press proof. However, if you look a little bit closer at them, some are just the regular silver embossing, but the ones that actually should be the press proof have still got the gold embossing on it. So you can still differentiate between that. So I suppose, why am I bringing this up on the podcast? I think if you're chasing these cards and you do genuinely want the press proof, you need to be very careful about the cards that you're purchasing on the secondary market. So when you're going onto eBay, yes, you need to check that it's press proof because, there's definitely a chance that, one might be not marked as press proof, even though that's, to me, very unlikely at this stage. But what you do need to check is the writing around the letters. Is it gold or is it the silver embossing? If you're a fan of Donruss in the past, you're going to love it this year too. I think it's a really enjoyable product. I probably think they made a mistake in terms of bumping up the number of Net Marvels in the cards, but other than that, it's a beautiful product. I'm glad it's back. I'm glad the next day autos are back. So yeah, if you see breaks of that, don't hesitate to jump in. It's pretty good. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is LeBron James. So why on earth are we talking about LeBron James? The Lakers are tanking. LeBron James is playing some of the, you could argue, the best basketball of his career. He's just dropped a 50-point game on the Wizards in the last week. They won that game. He was plus 22 in that game, 18 of 25 from the field, 6 of 9 from 3. And some of the threes he was hitting in transition, off the dribble, pulling up a couple of steps behind the three-point line, which is absolutely amazing. 8 of 8 from the free throw line, so he was just absolutely on fire. 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Why is it important to be talking about LeBron James now? So my working theory at the moment on LeBron is that, of course, he wants to make the playoffs. Of course, he'd want to win another championship. But realistically, I think the Lakers are hard up against it this year. If they miss the play-in tournament, I'll be absolutely shocked. So they're going to be in the play-in tournament, which is not a terrible thing for them because the bottom two seeds is actually the Minnesota Timberwolves and the LA Clippers. So you could argue that they could beat both of those teams quite handily with LeBron and with or without Anthony Davis. I think that's pretty fair to say. So the Lakers will be in the postseason in some type of capacity. But I think realistically where LeBron is at this stage is I think he's chasing down Kareem's scoring title because normally you would see LeBron at this stage be shut down. If the team isn't going to make the playoffs, he'll essentially just take off the back end of the season, rest up and come back, ready for next year. Whereas he's actually doing the complete opposite. His minutes the last few games have been 35, 45, 38, 37, 38, 35, 35. So he's playing, huge minutes for someone his age. And again, let's bring this back to hobby value. I really think in terms of him being talked about in the GOAT conversation, in terms of being talked about, the greatest player of all time, he's not going to catch MJ for the 6 championships. Like, that's not going to happen. So he's going to need to differentiate himself in different ways. So whether that be the leading scorer all time, whether he plays the most amount of minutes of all time, whether he is playing, the most games, like, whatever that he does, he has to do something that's absolutely extraordinary. So I think he can do the most points. I think that's absolutely something he can do because he has the literal classic definition of an old man game. He can back people down. He can shoot open shots. He can shoot in transition. He can shoot mid-range. He can still get to the basket, at times. He's definitely not blowing by guys as much as he used to, but, I think his hobby value is going to hold really strong. We're not going to see the dip that you would probably expect him if he's taking time off at the end of the year. So I think it's going to, really, I think people now are going to be buying and holding LeBron because he's the modern GOAT. I should say that, really. Moving on to someone else that should really be in GOAT status is Greg Popovich. He did overtake Don Nelson this week for the most wins of all time. We did a really in-depth breakdown about Pop and his card prices a few weeks back, so I'm not going to go over that again, but we have to mention Greg Popovich at this stage. So just having a look through his sold listings, I am absolutely, look, I'm not surprised because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but at the same time, it is amazing. So Popovich, number to 49, Orange Prism, 103 USD, number to 199, 45 USD, a base card selling for $1, a Mojo to 25, $246, a fast break, $10.50, red, white, and blue for $10. Look, I think if you're holding Popovich, again, if you've somehow pulled these in randoms and they're sitting in a box, this is the time to sell. This is not the time to buy, in my opinion. I think just wait for all of this hysteria to die down and then jump back into the market if you really want to own a piece of Pop. I've got a silver Pop on hand. I need to find it. I need to get it out of my box. I'm not moving it. That's something that I definitely wanted in my PC. I respect the absolute life out of this guy. I think he's just, one of the old-timers. I think the interesting, part here with San Antonio is, where do they go next? Because I don't get the feeling that he particularly wants to stick around and, develop this team on and on. I'm saying this in the kindest possible way. I think he was sticking around to get, the record set. So, who's going to take over him? Is it going to be Becky Hammon? Is she going to be the first female NBA coach? Is it going to be one of his other, long-time assistants? Or will he get someone else, Coach Bud come back? Would Steve Kerr come back and, replace him? For me, that's going to be really interesting to see, what happens in that space. Alrighty, let's check in with one of the big dogs because this is someone that we have not breathed his name at all this season. And the Dallas Mavericks have been having a sneaky good season. So they were very, very slow to start off with at the start of the year. And I think part of that was they named a new head coach. They installed a completely different system. They've had a little bit of roster turbulence the last couple of years, and then they had another in-season trade again. So I'm not that surprised that they started off slow. I actually think that Jason Kidd is a good strategist, but I'll also say too that he's not a common NBA thinker. I think the way that he sees the game and he perceives gameplay is a little bit out of the box and a little bit left of center. So I'm not overly surprised that his team took a little bit of time to pick up his concept. So in saying all of that though, currently Dallas is sitting at 5th place in a very, very competitive Western Conference, and they're sitting at 41-26. So they're one game off the 4th spot, and in terms of making it up to the 3rd spot, they're 5 games behind. So that's not a huge amount in this season as we've been traveling, and their last 10 games they're 8-2. So what does that say to you about the Porzingis trade? Was it actually an addition by subtraction, or actually is Dinwiddie a better piece for that team? So if you follow the Daryl Morey thought process, when he's building teams, if he can get a star at the center position, he'll take that star. So the example of that is Yao Ming, Dwight Howard, and now he's in Philadelphia, he's got Embiid. But other than that though, Daryl Morey's thought process about the center position is you get the cheapest and best available player at that position. And Morey has traditionally gone for young players or players who are essentially off like the recycle bin, or come in and play for you on a minimum contract, or say a mid-level exception or a veterans minimum, and they can start for you. So how are we applying the Daryl Morey rule here to the Dallas Mavericks? Well, what they've done is they've just basically put cheaper players into the center position, and then they've spent that money at the guard and also the ball handling position and the creation position. So watching the Dallas Mavericks now, the ball is, yes, it is predominantly in Luka's hands. That is absolutely true. But they now have that secondary playmaker there too. And Dinwiddie can play off the bounce. So what I mean by that is Luka can draw a crowd, he can kick out to Dinwiddie, and then Dinwiddie can still make a play. And they've been playing off each other really, really well. And also too, Dinwiddie's been setting up Luka for some nice open shots and also drives too. So I think that's a really interesting team building exercise in terms of, general managers, how they're building. And also too, you might say, well, actually, the Wizards won this trade because they've got a big that shoots threes and all that type of stuff. But then you think about Bertans and what he's giving the Dallas Mavericks. Well, he's a big too, and he's actually shooting really well since he's returned to Dallas. So that's, I think that's a really interesting trade that we should review in, say, 12 months or 2 years' time, because I think it's probably a little bit early to say, this team won or that team won. But the early results for me is that this is an absolute landslide win for Dallas. And in terms of their long-term, roster health and also looking after Luka, I think this is just absolutely phenomenal for them. It's going to give him the rest that he needs at, really crucial times. And the team won't sputter without him because Dinwiddie can just keep that offensive production going on. Alrighty, so Luka card value-wise, I'm just going to go to silvers. I'm going to go to PSA 10. The reason is because the volume of cards that's been sold for Luka is absolutely substantial. And I think at this stage, it's been pretty well established how many base cards there are. So I think, probably buying base at this stage is a little bit risky. But at the same time, if that's what your budget fits, go nuts. However, silver is really, really important in terms of, I think if you're going to make a large purchase and you are going to put something away for long term, I think this is the card that you want to be purchasing, because Prism is the absolute, the mothership. The Silver Prism is by far the most popular card, and the PSA 10, again, is the king. So if you're putting these, 4 things together, the 4th thing being Luka, this is the card you want to purchase and put away. Interesting time to buy at the moment, though. The last 3 months, he's down 25%. So he started at 3,500. He's currently down to 2,650, which is, it's massive money, but of course, it is also a massive dip too. So are you buying this card now because it's down 25%, or do you wait for it to go down a little bit more? I think at the moment, if you jump in now, yes, you might feel a little bit of short-term pain, but you also might feel, a lot of long-term gain. I think Luka is a sure thing. I'm a little bit befuddled as to why he is down so much. It could simply be that, the whole market is down. It could be just that. And we've talked about this a little bit before. It could be that the Mavericks are literally out of people's side of, line of sight. And to be honest, the Mavericks have really been out of my line of sight. And when I was doing a little bit more of a deep dive into this today and looking at the Dallas roster and their standings, their standings record actually really took me by surprise. And I think part of that is because, we're so focused on the Lakers, we're so focused on Zion, we're focused on Brooklyn, the Ben Simmons thing, Bucks, we're focused on Cade Cunningham, blah, blah, blah. So it's almost like arguably the best player of this new generation hasn't even, had a look in. And we haven't even mentioned Ja Morant in that argument too. So are we just glossing past actually what's, right in front of our eyes? And he's having a wonderful season. He's not playing badly. He's not injured. He was definitely slow to start the year. You can't deny that, but he's back in shape. There's no troubles there at all. So yeah, it's really interesting. I have heard someone who I would say that has got a very good understanding of markets and also the basketball card market to say, look, in 12 months, what you've been paying now, it's actually going to be going down a little bit further in 12 months. So if this is a massive purchase for you and you want to play the safe game, bookmark this date, wait 12 months and see where the market is sitting then. I don't want to go too in depth about the real world, but we do have, a significant conflict going on in Europe at the moment. Will this have, further, financial effects? Will it come into the card game? Are these the type of cards that people will flip when they get into financial trouble because this is something they're sort of sitting on as a nest egg? Absolutely. That's the type of thing that can happen. I think he's an absolutely wonderful buy at the moment. And the next buy that I want to talk about too, I'm going to segue straight into this, is Zion Williamson. It has been too long since we've done the Zion watch. So I say let's go. Zion was in the house. He was in New Orleans. He looked absolutely fantastic. There is an absolute load of rumors out there. He needs new surgery. He's coming back soon. He's in shape. He's been training again with New Orleans. He's been doing 3-on-3. The reports are so wild. They're so varied. I'm not even going to report them. I'm just going to put them all into one sentence, mix it up into a salad, and, roll the roulette wheel and see where we land. Like, who knows? Is he injured? Is he not injured? I have absolutely no idea. He looked great to me. He looked in shape. He looked engaged when he was sitting on the bench, which I think is really important. I think if you deny that there's been something going on behind the scenes with that, I think you're being naive. I think for someone to be out of the picture for so long, to be training in Oregon instead of training with a team, like, that is super weird. But at the same time, these guys are their own entities these days. They're not part of the team, so it's not an absolute shock. But let's go to card value. So the last 3 months, he's up 2.5%. So that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. The last month, though, he's up 33%. And the last 2 weeks, he's up 27%. So that to me says that there's definitely some sentiment that he's hit the bottom of the market. So if you're looking to jump in, that's a really good time to jump in. I think this says to me that he's coming back sooner than later. I think this says to me that people have seen his prices go down to a point now where they can't wait to buy. It's too good of a price to come in. The last sale was $2,000 US. So if we compare that to Donkey of 2,650, this is actually a seriously cool conversation. And this is where I miss Adam. Adam, if you're listening, mate, I miss you, and come back soon. But if you were here, mate, this is a question I'd be asking you. So at 2,000 USD, are you buying a Zion? Or 2,600, are you buying a Luka? Now, this is where this gets seriously interesting, because if you bought a Zion, before this 27% growth, you are absolutely laughing, and you made the right decision. So if you got that around the sort of 1,400, 1,300, you made yourself an absolutely perfect purchase, and congratulations to you. However, if you're then sitting that next to a Luka at 2,600, actually, I like the Luka heaps more, because I think Luka has got the type of body where he just seems like the type of dude that's a bit like LeBron. He's just going to keep playing and playing. Whereas I think we've already highlighted and we've discussed about the risk profile and the injury profile of Zion. Super interesting conversation. Look, if you're listening at home, we would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this. Are you buying Zion at 2K, or are you buying Doncic at 2,600? Thank you everybody for listening today. I'm going to cut this off here. I'm going to keep it nice and short and sweet today. It's just me by myself, so I just wanted to keep it, get an episode in, but at the same time not talk your ear off because it's just me by myself. Our sponsor for this week is Breaks, US Sports Cards Australia. That is my break page. Please join. I'd love to see you guys. Even if you don't jump in breaks, just join the page. Jump into the banter. We have trade nights. We also have a chat page. Join us. Breaks, US Sports Cards Australia. Love to see you there. Our socials at youcantcompthis. Instagram, youcantcompthis. Gmail, youcantcompthis@gmail.com. And of course, our trusty Facebook page, You Can't Comp This Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Good night.